Looking back, I can name the precise instant when everything shifted. Not the day I walked away, but 3 years earlier, standing in my own living room, balancing a tray of coffee for my wife's book club. "Oh, Gerald always has an opinion," Denise said with that polished, razor-sharp laugh. "But accountants, they're always counting, never creating." The women chuckled. None of them even glanced my way. I'd been invisible for years, but that night, something inside me cracked. They say revenge is best served cold. I served mine frozen. My wife had spent 20 years erasing me, so I became what she'd made, nothing more than a ghost. No argument, no letter. By dawn, I was gone. Left her the house, the cars, everything. She believed she'd won, until she tried to sell. That's when she learned I'd been preparing for this for 3 years. The ground under her feet was still mine. My name is Gerald Kramer. I'm 45, and I once thought being dependable was enough. I'd been chief accountant at Riverside Manufacturing for 22 years. Stable paycheck, steady benefits, reliable Gerald, the man who handled the numbers while others got the praise. I met Denise at a fundraiser when I was 23. She was studying education, confident, self-assured in ways I wasn't. We married within a year. 2 years later came Asher, then Amelia 3 years after that. I built a good life for us, a 3-bedroom home, 2 paid-off cars, college funds I never missed contributing to. But steady turned into dull. Reliable turned into unseen. About 5 years ago, the pattern began. Denise started making decisions on her own, refinancing the house, buying a new car, enrolling Asher in a $4,000 SAT program. When I questioned it, she sighed as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Gerald, I can't explain every detail. Some of us are living life, not tracking it on spreadsheets." The kids heard it. By 15, Asher spoke to me the same way, dismissing me, as though I were just background noise. Even Amelia learned to go to her mother for everything that mattered. One evening, I tried talking to Denise. Told her I felt disrespected, like something between us had died. She looked genuinely puzzled. "Gerald, of course I respect you. You're my husband. But you're not exactly thrilling. Maybe try taking initiative instead of waiting for permission." So, I did take initiative, just not the kind she imagined. I began studying corporate structures, Delaware LLCs, and asset protection strategies. I worked in manufacturing, but everything in that world ran on numbers, contracts, suppliers, layers of paperwork. I learned how companies shifted money through subsidiaries and trusts that appeared simple but hid complex webs beneath. I opened a business account for an LLC I registered in Delaware. Named it Ashmere Holdings, after the kids' initials. Started with $1,000 from a bonus Denise never knew existed. Then I did it again, different names, different states, small sums, always within legal limits. By the time I planned my departure, I had 6 entities, none traceable to me, managed through registered agents and P.O. boxes. 3 years of building a life Denise would never see coming. The hardest part was the kids. Asher, 17, already looking at colleges. Amelia, 14, still needing her father. I told myself I was teaching them that dignity matters, that a man shouldn't accept being diminished. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd spent 22 years being ignored. Now, I wanted to see what happened when I became impossible to find. 3 months before leaving, I made the final moves. Transferred the house title to Denise's name, with a clause she'd signed years earlier, hidden in refinancing paperwork. Same with the cars, the joint accounts. On paper, she owned everything. In reality, I still owned the foundation beneath it all. The night before I left, I stood by Asher's bed, then Amelia's, memorizing their faces. This wasn't abandonment, I told myself. It was execution of a plan. When morning came, I was already gone. The coffee pot was still warm when Denise realized something was wrong. I know, because I'd set the timer before I left. 5:47 a.m. It would finish brewing at 6:15, right when she usually came downstairs. Maybe it was a courtesy. Or maybe I wanted her to see how perfectly I'd planned everything. By then, I was 300 miles away, driving a 12-year-old Honda Civic I'd bought with cash 6 months prior, registered to one of my LLCs. No connection to Gerald Kramer at all. My old phone sat in a dumpster behind a rest stop in Pennsylvania. The new one, a cheap flip phone, rested in the cup holder. 2 contacts only, my lawyer's office and an encrypted messaging app I'd created for the kids, if they ever figured things out. 3 years of preparation, every angle tested, every gap sealed. At 2:47 a.m. that final night, I'd signed the last documents. Property transfers, vehicle titles, account authorizations, all digital, notarized, timestamped through portals Denise didn't even know existed. By 3:30, I'd cleared my side of the closet. Not packed, cleared. Everything I needed fit neatly into 2 duffel bags, clothes, documents, and a laptop loaded with encrypted files. The rest, I dropped off at a donation bin on my way out of town. I didn't leave a note. What would I even write? Sorry for vanishing, but you made me invisible first. Sorry for taking control of my own life. Sorry for refusing to spend another 20 years apologizing for existing. No, silence was cleaner. I'd rented a small room above a hardware store in a town I'd visited once, 3 years earlier, precisely because I'd never mentioned it to anyone. The owner, Carl, 72, didn't care about much beyond whether rent came in on time. How long you need it for? He'd asked when I called. Indefinitely, I said. Cash. First and last month. He agreed instantly. The room was tiny, 1 window, a hot plate, and a bathroom whose shower hadn't been updated since 1987. Perfect. I wasn't there for comfort. I was there to start over. My new phone buzzed, a notification from the alert I'd set up on Denise's email. She'd just logged in, probably checking the accounts, trying to make sense of what had happened. She'd find everything in her name. The house, the cars, the checking account. She'd feel confused, maybe even triumphant for a moment. Look at that, she'd think, he finally did something right. Then she'd try to refinance, or sell, or move money around. That's when she'd stumble onto the contingency clauses, those small paragraphs buried in paperwork she'd signed 2 years ago, half listening to the TV, trusting me to handle the boring details. Clauses that gave Ashmere Holdings, my Delaware LLC, final approval rights on any major transaction involving the property. She owned the assets. I owned the leverage. I stopped at a truck stop diner, ordered coffee and eggs from a waitress who barely looked at me. Just another tired middle-aged man in a wrinkled shirt. Forgettable. Exactly what I needed to be. I thought of Asher and Amelia, wondering if they were awake yet, if Denise had told them I was gone, or if she was still trying to process it herself. I'd left something for them. A trust fund they'd access at 21. Enough for college or a fresh start. I'd written instructions carefully, not explaining what I did, but why. Whether they'd ever understand was another matter. The eggs arrived. I ate mechanically, without taste. Around me, truckers chatted about routes and weather, ordinary people living ordinary lives. I wasn't one of them anymore. I wasn't Gerald Kramer, the steady accountant, the invisible husband, the father dismissed with sighs. I was no one. And for the first time in 22 years, that felt like freedom. At 7:15 a.m., Denise called my workplace. I knew because my forwarding service sent me the transcript. This is Denise Kramer, she said. I need to speak with Gerald immediately. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kramer, the receptionist replied. Mr. Kramer submitted his resignation 3 days ago. Effective immediately. Silence followed. That's impossible. The paperwork's here, ma'am, digital signature and all. She hung up. I sat in my rented room, reading the transcript while, below, Carl argued with a supplier about lumber prices. Normal life, continuing as mine unraveled completely. My monitoring alert buzzed again. Denise was in our shared accounts. I watched her cursor dart across the family computer screen, bank statements, property deeds, car titles. Everything listed her as sole owner. Then she opened the mortgage documents. Her cursor froze. Primary lien holder. Ashmere Holdings, LLC. She Googled it. Nothing. Just a Delaware registration, A.P.O. box, a registered agent. No website, no trace. She called the bank, then pulled up the refinancing paperwork from 2 years ago, the one she'd signed absent-mindedly. Page 17. Any sale or major refinancing requires written approval from the primary lien holder. She'd unknowingly given me veto power over her own house. Her hands trembled as she found the car titles. Same story. Override clauses buried deep in DMV forms. 18 months of meticulous planning. Every document, every signature, every clause designed to look routine. My burner phone rang, unknown number. Mr. Kramer, a professional-sounding woman said. This is Lisa from County Records. We have your wife here. She's upset about property documentation and— Wrong number, I said calmly, and hung up. I powered off the phone, snapped the SIM card in half, and slid in a new one. 3 minutes later, Carl's argument downstairs ended. The bell above the door chimed. Someone asked about light bulbs. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling, wondering if Asher and Amelia knew yet. A part of me felt guilty, the same part that remembered bedtime stories and helping with homework. But the larger part of me, the one ignored for 20 years, felt only a cold, steady satisfaction. She'd wanted initiative. I'd finally given her exactly that. The hardware store became my testing ground. Carl didn't ask questions when I offered to reorganize his inventory. He just handed me a clipboard and muttered about young folks and their computers. I was 45, but to Carl, anyone under 70 counted as young. The place was chaos, receipts stuffed into shoeboxes, inventory scribbled on paper, orders remembered instead of recorded. The store leaked money in ways Carl couldn't see. How long you been running this? I asked one afternoon. 43 years, he said, lighting a cigarette beneath his own no-smoking sign. My daddy ran at 30 before that. You making any money? He laughed, a wet, rattling sound. I pay the bills mostly. 2 weeks later, I'd rebuilt his entire system, digitized the inventory, found $15,000 in duplicate orders buried in the back, discovered 3 suppliers overcharging him for years. How'd you catch that? Carl asked, squinting at my spreadsheet. Math and attention, I said. Within a month, I'd cut his operating costs by 30%. For the first time in 5 years, he turned a real profit. You want a job? He asked one morning. I want equity. He blinked. What? You're 72. You'll retire eventually. Sell me 20% now. I'll handle operations, raise profits. When you're ready, I'll buy the rest. With what money? I have resources. He studied me for a moment. You're running from something. No, I said honestly. Running towards something. There's a difference. We shook hands that afternoon. By evening, I'd transferred funds from one of my LLCs. Clean, documented, perfectly legal. Carl signed without reading carefully, just like Denise used to. The irony didn't escape me. That night, I checked my monitoring systems. Denise had hired a lawyer, Lexi Monroe. Young, sharp, expensive. A good choice. She needed someone competent. I opened a document I'd been drafting. A proposal to acquire distressed commercial properties, abandoned, foreclosed, forgotten buildings. I already had 9 LLC structures ready. Enough to begin acquiring assets. Enough to build something that was mine. Gerald Kramer, the accountant, had spent his life maintaining other people's systems. The man I was becoming would build his own. 6 weeks after buying my stake in the hardware store, a letter arrived. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single business card. Theodore Vance, financial restructuring. When you're ready to talk. And a phone number. Nothing else. I'd never heard the name. I showed it to Carl. Vance? He muttered, squinting at the card. That old snake's still alive. You know him? Knew him, 30 years ago. Back when my daddy ran this place. Vance was some kind of consultant. Helped a few local shops stay afloat during the recession in the 90s. Carl handed the card back. He disappeared after that. Just vanished one day. Nobody knew where. I studied the card. The paper was heavy, expensive. The print, immaculate. That evening, I called the number from my burner phone. He answered on the first ring. Mr. Kramer, a calm voice said. I was wondering when you'd reach out. How do you know my name? I know everything about you, Gerald. How you left. How you built your exit. The LLCs, the trusts, the clauses. Impressive for someone with no formal training in this craft. My stomach tightened. Who are you? Someone who did exactly what you're doing, 23 years ago. His tone was measured, academic, like a professor explaining a familiar formula. I'm 71 now. Terminal cancer. 6 months, maybe 8. I'd like to meet before I run out of time. Why? Because what you're attempting is dangerous if done incorrectly. And because I'd like to pass along what I've learned. Call it a dying man's hobby. We met 3 days later, at a diner 40 miles from where I was staying. He was thin, gray, his eyes analytical and alert. You're making mistakes, Vance said after we ordered coffee. Small ones, but they'll compound. Such as, your LLCs are structured well, but 3 use the same registered agent. Pattern recognition could expose that. Your monitoring systems are solid, but you access them from consistent locations, creates a geographic trail. And your equity deal at the hardware store, you signed with a slightly altered version of your real signature. Handwriting analysis could connect the dots. I set down my cup. How do you know all this? Because I've been watching. Not stalking, observing. When your case crossed certain channels, I recognized the method. Similar to mine. Cleaner in some areas, sloppier in others. What channels? He smiled faintly. There's a network, informal. People who've done what we've done. We don't meet, don't communicate directly. We just watch for patterns. When someone executes an exit this precise, word spreads. That sounds paranoid. It is. And it's kept me invisible for over 20 years. He slid a folder across the table. I'm going to give you something valuable, a corrected structure for your holdings. The new setup included different registered agents, randomized access habits, and adjusted signature protocols. If I followed these steps, I'd lower my risk considerably. Why help me? I asked. Because no one helped me, he said. I made mistakes that cost me years of anxiety. Nearly got caught twice. He slid a folder toward me. And because men like us are uncommon. Most people who walk away do it rashly, out of emotion, they're caught within months. You planned. That deserves respect. I opened the folder. Inside were charts, process outlines, even templates for restructuring documents. There's one condition, he continued. When you succeed, when you build what you're aiming for, help the next person who tries. Not everyone. Only those with the right motives. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Survival. I studied him. What did you leave behind? A wife who spent 15 years convincing me I was worthless, he said. 2 daughters who learned to treat me the same. I left them everything physical and kept only what mattered, my self-respect and my future. He sipped his coffee. My girls are in their 40s now. One reached out 5 years ago. We meet for lunch sometimes. She understands now. The other still despises me. That's her decision. Do you regret it? Never. But I regret how I did it. The missteps, the close calls. You have a chance to do this right. That's worth something. We spoke for 3 hours. He revealed strategies I hadn't imagined, risks I hadn't foreseen, methods to grow wealth invisibly. When we parted, he shook my hand. You'll face a moral test one day, he said. A moment when helping your old family conflicts with protecting your new life. When that happens, remember why you left. Don't let guilt make you careless. 6 weeks later, a newspaper clipping arrived in the mail, Theodore Vance's obituary. Natural causes. No funeral. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note. Implemented your changes. Died clean. Make me proud. That night, I sat staring at it, wondering if that would be my fate, helping ghosts stay unseen until I became one. Then I opened my laptop and began applying every correction he'd advised. 8 months after I vanished, Denise's lawyer filed for a forensic audit. I'd expected it sooner. Lexi Monroe was skilled, but thorough, and thorough takes time. The request landed on a judge's desk with 40 pages of evidence. Denise accused me of hiding funds, falsifying property records, and moving titles unlawfully. Technically all true, but entirely legal. The judge approved a limited audit, accounts, properties, business records. They'd hunt for hidden assets or fraud. They'd find nothing. I'd spent 9 months scrubbing every trace. New agents for each company, randomized access routines, legitimate documentation. Thanks to Vance, my framework was airtight. But the audit signaled something else. Denise was escalating, which meant she was unraveling. I was sorting inventory at Carl's hardware store when my encrypted phone vibrated. A message from Asher. Mom's drinking again. Every night. She won't talk about you, but she's falling apart. My hand froze. This was the moral test Vance had warned about. The moment when compassion for the past clashed with the future I was building. Denise was sinking. The woman who dismissed me for 2 decades was now collapsing because I'd withdrawn. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. A larger part felt only conflict. I typed back, is she getting help? No. She says she's fine. But Harper found bottles hidden in her closet. Amelia was 14, watching her mother unravel. I shut my eyes. This wasn't what I wanted. I'd wanted freedom, a chance to rebuild, to prove I mattered, not to destroy someone else. But I knew the truth. Denise's downfall wasn't my doing. I hadn't forced the bottle into her hand. I'd only stepped away from a life where I'd been erased. Her response belonged to her. I typed carefully. Tell Amelia I love her. Tell her none of this is her fault. And tell your mother that if she wants help, there are people who can give it. But I can't be one of them. She won't accept help from anyone. Then she'll have to hit rock bottom. That's not cruelty, Asher, that's reality. You can't save someone who refuses to save themselves. A long pause. Then you sound different. I am different. Is that good? I thought about it. Had it been good, I'd survived, built something, reclaimed my dignity, but the cost was watching my family struggle from afar. I don't know yet. I typed honestly. Ask me in 5 years. 3 weeks later, the audit results arrived. No evidence of fraud. Every transaction properly documented. Property transfers legally executed. Denise's lawyer tried to compel disclosure of LLC ownership. The judge denied it. Delaware's privacy protections were absolute. She lost, not the marriage, but the legal fight to prove I'd done anything wrong. I had only done something she never saw coming. That night, I received a message from Asher. Mom hired a private investigator. I smiled, not from cruelty, but from respect. She was adapting, fighting back, becoming formidable. Good. Let her chase ghosts. Let her waste money on investigators who would find nothing. Meanwhile, I continued building, growing, proving that Gerald Kramer, the invisible man, was never really invisible. He had only been waiting for permission to exist. Now that I'd stopped waiting, I was unstoppable. The detective's name was Russell Kane, former FBI, now private sector. Denise had hired the best. He found the hardware store in month 11. I was restocking paint when he walked in. Mid-50s, gray suit, carrying decades of experience reading people. Excuse me, Kane said to Carl. I'm looking for the owner. Carl pointed at me with a cigarette. That would be him. Owns 20% anyway. Kane's eyes met mine, analyzing. He pulled out his phone, checked a photo, then looked back. You look different, he said. But the bone structure matches Gerald Kramer. I set down the paint can, meeting his gaze. I don't know who that is. Your wife hired me to find you. I don't have a wife. Kane smiled slightly. You're good. The name change, the LLCs, the clean exit. It's professional level work. But you made one mistake. You kept your habits. The way you organize inventory, stack items by size and color. Your wife mentioned you did the same at home obsessively. Most people can't change patterns like that. I wiped my hands on my pants. Even if I were Gerald Kramer, what would you do? I'm not wanted for anything. No warrants, no debts, no crimes. No, Kane agreed. But your wife wants to talk. Says there are things to settle. Then she can settle them with a judge. That's what lawyers are for. She's struggling. Your kids are struggling. You know that, right? If they are, that's unfortunate. But I'm not responsible for other people's choices. Kane studied me. You really believe that? I do. I spent 22 years responsible for everyone else's happiness. Nobody was responsible for mine. So yes, people need to handle their own struggles. Even your children. That hit harder. I kept my expression neutral. Especially children. They need to learn life isn't fair. People aren't reliable. Better to learn early. Kane set a business card on the counter. When you're ready to have a real conversation, call this number. Not for your wife, for your kids. They deserve better than wondering if their father is dead or doesn't care. He left. I stared at the car for a long time. Carl shuffled over. That true? You got kids? Yes, a different life. They know I'm alive. They know why I left. Not the full story. Maybe someday. Carl lit a cigarette. My boy stopped talking to me at 23. Thought I was too hard, too demanding. Didn't speak for 11 years. Then one day he came here. Said he understood why I pushed him. Said thank you. What changed? He had kids. Realized parenting isn't about being liked. It's about preparing them for a world that doesn't care about feelings. I picked up Kane's card. Did that make losing 11 years worth it? No. But it made the 11 years less painful. That night, I sat in my room and wrote a letter, not to Denise, but to Asher and Amelia. I explained everything. Why I left, how I planned it, what I was building. I explained that their mother wasn't a villain, just someone who had forgotten to see me as human. I explained that leaving wasn't abandonment, it was survival. I sealed the letter, addressed it to my attorney with instructions. Deliver when they turn 21. Then I went back to work. 2 years after walking away, I owned controlling shares in 4 different companies. The hardware store was flourishing. Carl had retired completely, sold me his last shares. I'd grown the business, added online orders, and started supplying contractors directly. I'd also purchased a small plant that made custom cabinets and hired Eddie, the day laborer who once asked about my business philosophy, as operations manager. I'd invested in a commercial development on the edge of town, 6 units, all rented out to local entrepreneurs for fair prices. I'd launched a consulting agency too, helping small businesses reorganize, avoid bankruptcy, and improve efficiency. Word traveled fast. Before long, I had more clients than I could possibly take. None of it was under my old name. I was Eli Hayes now, with a new social security number, legally obtained through a complex process involving name change laws and identity restoration. Everything official, everything clean. Gerald Kramer existed only in court files and outdated tax records. My consulting work brought me face to face with people trapped just as I once was, stuck in lives they'd built themselves. Marriages where they'd become invisible. Jobs where they were disposable. I helped them see choices they couldn't before. "You're telling me to leave my wife?" one client asked, a man named Robert, stuck for 15 years. "I'm telling you to decide if staying serves any purpose besides avoiding discomfort," I said. "If it does, stay. If not, plan your exit carefully." "That's cold." "No," I replied. "Cold is spending your life diminished. Strategic is choosing differently." Most ignored the advice. They'd go home, patch things up, convince themselves it would get better. A few listened. A few planned. A few left, and I helped them do it properly, legally, quietly. I never shared my own story, but they sensed it somehow, in how I spoke about dignity and survival. One evening, my encrypted phone buzzed. A message from Asher. "Got into Cornell. Full scholarship. Thanks for the trust fund. Mom says I should reject it on principle." "I'm not that stupid." I smiled and typed back, "Congratulations. Make it count. Will you visit?" That question hit hard. Could I show up to his graduation? His orientation? Any moment in his real life again? Not yet, but someday. When I've built enough to stand in front of you as someone you'd respect. Not the man who left. The man who survived and built something real. Long pause. Then he replied, "I already respect you. I understand why you did it." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, feeling something new. Not pride. Relief. "Thank you," I typed. "That means more than you know." 3 days later, Amelia wrote, "Asher told me about Cornell. I'm happy for him. Mom's not drinking anymore. She's in therapy. She asks about you sometimes. Not angry, just curious. Progress. Not reconciliation, but progress." I'd spent 2 years building, for companies, a new identity, financial security. But reading her words, I realized I'd built something else too. Distance from the guilt that once defined me. I wasn't the villain. Neither was Denise. We were two people who'd failed each other, and I'd chosen survival over slow collapse. That wasn't heroic, but it wasn't cowardly either. It was just a decision I'd made, and one I could live with. The call came on a Tuesday morning, for years after I'd left. "Dad, Mom's in the hospital," Asher said, his voice tense. "Heart attack. She's stable, but the surgery's expensive. Insurance won't cover everything. She needs about $80,000 out of pocket." The coffee cooled in my hand. The house, cars, and savings I'd left her, all gone. She'd spent everything proving she didn't need me. What does she want from me? Nothing. She doesn't know I'm calling. But Harper's scared. And I thought you should know. I sat in my office above the hardware store, staring at profit sheets. I had the money. Could pay it quietly. Vance's words echoed. "Don't let guilt make you sloppy." But this wasn't guilt. It was a debt, not to Denise, but to the man I once was. "I'll take care of it," I said. "Dad, she can't know it's you." She'd refuse. "She won't know." I made 3 calls. Contacted the hospital's billing office through one of my LLCs. Arranged an anonymous payment via a medical charity fund I'd set up years earlier for situations just like this. By afternoon, the payment cleared, recorded as grant assistance. Denise would never know. That evening, Asher texted, "Surgery scheduled. They said a charity covered it. Was that you? Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does." "Then yes. But let her think she got lucky. Why help her after everything?" "Because I left to live, not to watch her die." 3 days later, Denise's surgery went smoothly. Harper sent me a photo, her mother resting peacefully, surrounded by monitors. Alive. I stared at that picture for a long time. The woman I'd spent 22 years with. The one who'd made me invisible. The one I'd walked away from. I didn't love her anymore. Didn't miss her. But I didn't hate her either. She was part of a past I'd finally outgrown. Helping her survive felt like closing the last door gently, not slamming it. 5 years after I disappeared, Asher graduated from Cornell. I stood at the back of the ceremony, sunglasses and a hat hiding my face. Watched him cross the stage, accept his engineering degree. Denise sat in the family section with Amelia and her parents. Healthier, calmer, living her own life. Good for her. After the ceremony, I waited by my truck. Asher found me easily. We'd planned it. You came, he said. Told you I would. We stood awkwardly for a moment. Then he hugged me hard. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. The trust fund. The surgery money. All of it. You earned the education, I said. The surgery, that was just decency. He studied me for a moment. You look different. Solid. Like you actually exist now. I do exist, I said. Just differently than before. Will you meet Amelia? She's 19 now. She asks about you all the time. Someday, when she's ready to understand everything. She already does, he said. Mom told her last year, during recovery. Said she'd been unfair to you. Took you for granted. That stunned me. Denise had said that. Therapy really could change people. She even asked if I'd seen you. What did you tell her? That you're alive. That you built something that matters. That you're not the villain she thought you were. We talked another hour, about his career, his offers, his life. When it was time to part, he asked, do you regret it? Any of it? I thought for a long moment. I regret the pain it caused you and Amelia. But I don't regret surviving. Both can be true. That's fair, he said, and smiled. I drove home. To my businesses, my life. Gerald Kramer had been declared legally dead 2 years earlier, but Eli Hayes was alive, thriving. I now own 9 companies, employed 73 people, and helped dozens rebuild their own lives. Not bad for a ghost. That evening, I sat in my apartment and wrote one last letter to Amelia. I told her everything I couldn't say aloud, that I loved her, that I was proud of her, that my leaving was never about her. I sealed it, labeled it, and placed it in my safe. She'd get it when she was ready. Until then, I'd keep building, proving that the invisible man had always been worth seeing. And maybe someday, I'd be ready to be seen again. For now, just being alive was enough.